The National Cancer Institute is, of course, the world premier organization for cancer research. ASH is thrilled to have the director of the NCI joining us for a keynote speech, Dr. Ned Sharpless, who is also a practicing hematologist. Thank you so much for joining us here on ASH TV. Wanted to talk a little bit about how your vision for NCI is also dovetailing, if you will, with what is important for hematologists.
Sure, I think there are a lot of ways in which research funded by the National Cancer Institute impacts the community interested in blood cancer. When I came to the NCI, I spent a lot of time listening to stakeholders about what they thought the NCI could do better and where we should really apply our focus. And I identified 4 key focus areas that are all relevant to the research in hematologic cancers. So for example, we're really prioritizing, in fact the Congress has asked us to prioritize support for the workforce, to develop the cancer researchers of the future, if you will, including researchers in blood cancer. Secondly, we've announced a real commitment, a continued commitment to basic science, because while we have made a lot of progress in cancer research, there's still some cancers that we don't fully understand molecularly, and therefore we need to press the basic science to make sure we can develop treatments for all kinds of cancer. A third area is we were trying to get very serious and deliberate about how we handle data, big data at the NCI, and organize data sets such that we have large multimodal data that we can use for cancer research in a variety of enterprises. And lastly, we have to take on the problem of clinical trials. About everything that we do useful in patients today is the result of a successful clinical trial, but cancer's changed a lot and cancer research has changed a lot, and so we have to make sure clinical trials keep up with that.
Could you drill down just a little bit, because that was the next question on how do we overcome some of the obstacles to getting clinical trials moved forward?
Yeah, of course, I think sort of what's happened in oncology and in blood cancer as well is that we used to think of cancer as sort of a monolithic entity. We had breast cancer or lung cancer or leukemia, and now we realize that each of those diseases, those tissue-specific things, have many, many subtypes. And so instead of having these large trials of 1,000 patients that where they're randomized to therapy that's slightly different, we have much smaller precision trials where patients are allocated to therapy based on the molecular genetics of their tumor. And that reality is good news for the patients. It allows them to get more effective therapy with less toxicity. But from the point of view of administering a clinical trial, it's much more complicated. We're incentivizing new kinds of trials, we're putting new funding in, we're getting serious about data aggregation of clinical data. There's a lot in the works for clinical trials to improve them for the cancer research enterprise.
Probably the toughest question to ask is, look in the crystal ball. What do you see over the next, say, 5 to 10 years in terms of where cancer research is going, where the research is going in terms specifically for hematologists?
Yeah, there's a lot of exciting areas. I think, even, for example, in a disease like myeloma, there's so many new active agents that a real focus right now is just figuring out how to use them together and in what order and in what patients. And if we had no new advances in myeloma, we'd still be quite busy for the next decade just figuring out those problems. So that's different, say, for a certain like pediatric brain cancers, where we need new basic science understanding of those diseases, and we just aren't sure what the right idea is for that therapy. One area where I think there's really a lot of promise for hematologic malignancies, but for all cancer, is this burgeoning field of immuno-oncology, where we've had a lot of successes, but we're still really in the infancy of that scientific understanding of those agents and how to use them and how to combine them.
Dr. Ned Sharpless, thank you so much for coming and joining us on ASH News TV and for being here at the ASH Annual Meeting.
Thank you so much for having me.